Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we have a story that will take you on an emotional journey, exploring the depths of betrayal and the unexpected twists of fate. A mistress convinced a millionaire to send his pregnant wife to a mental hospital, but the truth shattered him. Picture a world where love, trust, and loyalty are tested beyond imagination. A glamorous mistress, a devoted yet vulnerable wife, and an unsuspecting millionaire are about to embark on a roller coaster of deceit, heartbreak, and redemption. In this riveting tale of twisted affections, a manipulative stranger threatens to tear apart a once happy marriage, driving a pregnant woman into the cold confines of a mental hospital. When the truth finally emerges, it strikes like a lightning bolt, shattering illusions and leaving irreversible damage. Brace yourself for a journey through jealousy, betrayal, and the ultimate fight for hope. Welcome to a story you'll never forget. Damien Rothschild had always been the most pragmatic of men, carrying the distinct aura of someone who had built his empire from sweat and sheer force of will. His lavish office soared high above Manhattan's skyline, lined with Italian leather chairs and marble floors that gleamed with wealth. To the average onlooker, Damien was the epitome of success, handsome, strong, and wise in business. He was married to Samantha Rothschild, an equally stunning woman known for her charity work and supportive nature. The city's gossip columns heralded them as the power couple of the decade, owing to their philanthropic endeavors and public adoration. Their wedding, just 3 years ago, had been the event of the season, boasting celebrities, politicians, and even a few royals among the guests. Anyone observing them would assume they were living a flawless fairy tale romance. Yet, behind the polished veneer, cracks were forming. Samantha was pregnant, nearly 6 months along, and the physical and emotional toll was starting to show. Morning sickness, sudden mood swings, and a fragile disposition had altered her once vivacious energy. Damien, typically a doting husband, found himself busier than ever at work, finalizing a multi-million-dollar real estate acquisition that demanded almost all his attention. Slowly, an emotional distance seeped between them. That was when Amelana Blanc sauntered into their lives. Introduced at a high-profile charity gala, she radiated confidence and intrigue with each step. Her rich auburn hair cascaded down her back, and a flirtatious smile glinted with hidden intent. She had the polished accent of someone who navigated international circles, part French, part aristocratic finishing school, seemingly perfect in every way. She volunteered her skills in fundraising, quickly catching Damien's eye. The rumor mill buzzed the moment she set foot at Rothschild Tower. Some employees raised eyebrows when she was assigned an office just 2 doors down from Damien's executive suite, especially since she was hired as an external consultant. Whispers abounded about potential nepotism or personal favors. None of that mattered to Damien, who found her contributions significant. She brought in new donors, arranged opulent galas, and seemed to magically connect him with influential figures he had long struggled to approach. Amelana's presence expanded beyond the professional. She began stopping by unannounced at after-work events, dinner parties, and even the Rothschild home. At first, Samantha tried to befriend her. After all, she was expecting to share her husband's philanthropic vision with an accomplished woman who had the same philanthropic goals. But Samantha sensed an unsettling undercurrent. There was a specific way Amelana looked at Damien, covetous yet cunning. And though Samantha couldn't pinpoint any outright inappropriate behavior, she felt a gnawing sense of being quietly pushed aside. Late one evening, as Samantha tried to rest from an exhausting day of prenatal checkups, she overheard an oddly hushed phone conversation between Damien and Amelana. His tone had the softness he once reserved for her alone. Heart thumping, Samantha retreated to bed, trying to dismiss any paranoid thoughts. But doubt had already begun to bloom. Little did she know, these early seeds of suspicion would soon spiral into an all-consuming nightmare, one that threatened not just her marriage, but her very sanity. Samantha woke the next morning, determined to quell her gnawing anxieties. With an effort, she donned a serene smile and focused on the baby, her top priority. Yet, as Damien left for the office, the tension between them was palpable. He offered only a rushed kiss on her cheek, something that felt more perfunctory than affectionate. Samantha tried to remind herself that everything was fine. He was busy, she was pregnant, and the stress of city life could amplify small misunderstandings. Still, a voice inside her whispered that Amalana's presence might not be so innocent. Far removed from Samantha's silent worries, the staff at Rothschild Tower bustled. Amalana cemented her role as an indispensable asset to Damien's philanthropic engagements. Her cunning approach to networking reeled in a significant new sponsor, a private equity mogul named Patrick Beaumont, known for his secretive dealings and lavish gifts. Others in Damien's close circle, particularly his personal assistant Harriet Lou, marveled at Amalana's uncanny ability to appear at every crucial moment. It was as if Amalana had memorized the entire corporate calendar. After weeks of quiet suspicion, Samantha decided to confront the subtle changes invading her life. She scheduled a doctor's appointment that Damien promised he would attend. Every ultrasound was precious to her. The heartbeat of their child held the promise of new life and a hopeful future. As the moment arrived, Samantha, nervous and excited, sat in the waiting room. Minutes crawled by, but Damien was nowhere to be seen. Her heart sank. She tried calling him, but there was no answer. Suddenly, her phone buzzed with a text. An emergency meeting came up. "So sorry, can't make it. We'll make it up to you soon. Damien?" When the doctor finally called her name, Samantha walked in alone, eyes brimming with disappointed tears. The baby was healthy and vibrant, and the sight of that tiny heart fluttering on the ultrasound screen momentarily made her forget her troubles. But once she stepped out of the office, the reality came crashing down. Where was Damien? Why had he not given their unborn child priority over business? In the following days, Samantha took a leap of courage. She decided to visit Damien at his office without warning. Upon arriving, she discovered that he was away, apparently at a lunch with Amalana. The receptionist's sympathetic glance confirmed Samantha's insecurities. Clutching her purse, she rode the elevator back down, her stomach twisting. Instead of heading home, Samantha decided on an unplanned act of boldness. She requested the address of the restaurant from Harriet Lou, then hailed a cab. She wanted to see for herself what was really happening. When she arrived, Samantha saw them. Damien and Amalana, seated at a discreet corner table. Her husband was leaning forward, engrossed in conversation, while Amalana brushed her hand lightly across his knuckles in a gesture too familiar for Samantha's comfort. Samantha's chest tightened. Were they merely discussing another charity gala, or was there something deeper, more personal happening? No matter how deeply she tried to rationalize it, the suspicion grew. She felt nauseous, not just from her pregnancy, but from the dread that the man she adored was slipping away. Anxiety flared through her body in intense waves. That night, long after she returned home, Samantha paced the living room, torn between confronting Damien or seeking solace in denial. She never guessed that the next moves Amalana would make would turn her from a worried wife into someone labeled unstable, someone who needed professional intervention. Or so certain people would claim. The tension in the Rothschild penthouse escalated over the next 2 weeks. Samantha's questions about Amalana grew more pointed, but Damien always dismissed them as irrational or brought on by pregnancy hormones. "You're overthinking," he'd say gently, handing her a cup of chamomile tea. "I can't cancel important meetings just because you feel uncomfortable." Despite his soothing tone, Samantha felt a chill in her soul. Amalana, for her part, played the game brilliantly. She sent lavish gift baskets to Samantha with notes that read, "For the mother-to-be, from the bottom of my heart." She offered to organize a baby shower, though Samantha politely declined. Everyone, from Harriet Lou to the doorman at Rothschild Tower, saw Amalana as sweet and considerate. Only Samantha sensed the poisonous undertone beneath the facade. Increasingly, Samantha found it difficult to sleep. Nightmares plagued her. Amalana standing over her bed, wearing a malicious smirk, Damien turning away, indifferent. Each morning, Samantha woke up drenched in sweat and fear. At first, she hesitated to speak to anyone, worried they would dismiss her concerns as hormonal illusions. But in a last-ditch attempt to find support, she contacted an old friend, Dr. Rachel Peterson, a well-respected psychiatrist who had known Samantha since college. Dr. Peterson invited Samantha to her office for a confidential chat over tea. In a warmly lit room, Samantha poured out her heart, detailing how she felt overshadowed by Amalana and neglected by Damien. Dr. Peterson listened carefully, asking incisive questions, but was cautious about making any immediate judgments. She advised Samantha to look for concrete signs and to keep track of any suspicious circumstances in a private journal. If something truly is happening, Dr. Peterson said, written evidence could help you and Damien navigate the truth. Encouraged, Samantha began making entries in a small leather-bound notebook. She recorded the days Damien missed important appointments, the odd comments Amalana made about taking care of everything, or the fleeting moments she caught them in what seemed like intimate gestures. This clandestine act gave her a sense of control. She felt less alone, knowing she was documenting her experiences. But unbeknownst to Samantha, Amalana was 3 steps ahead. She had been carefully observing Samantha's behavior. The nights she paced around the penthouse, the phone calls to Dr. Peterson, the times Samantha peeked into Damien's office unannounced. Having gained the trust of the housekeeper, Amalana learned Samantha was journaling her paranoid thoughts. Seizing the opportunity, Amalana began planting seeds of Samantha's supposed instability in Damien's mind. "How's Samantha doing?" she asked one afternoon, her tone layered with concern. "She seems anxious. I just want to be sure she's all right. Pregnancy can be stressful. She's been coming to the office unannounced, looking frazzled." Damien frowned. He adored Samantha, but the strain on his own shoulders was significant. He admitted his wife had been restless and moody, often snapping at him or bursting into tears. Amalana nodded sympathetically, pressing just enough to set his mind churning. "Maybe she should talk to someone," she suggested gently. "We want what's best for her, don't we?" A couple of days later, while Samantha was at a prenatal yoga class, Amalana managed to slip into the penthouse. She told the housekeeping staff she'd been asked to pick up some documents for Damien. While rummaging in the study, she found Samantha's private journal. Its pages held her rawest fears and suspicions. Amalana snapped photographs of every page with her phone, meticulously capturing Samantha's emotional turmoil. With these images, Amalana was armed, ready to frame Samantha as dangerously unstable. All she needed was the right moment to unleash the havoc that would steer Damien closer to her clutches. It began with small, seemingly accidental incidents designed to further unsettle Samantha's grasp on reality. First, certain items in the penthouse started going missing. Her favorite scarf, a set of antique keys passed down from her grandmother, and even the small framed ultrasound photo she kept by her bedside. Samantha searched everywhere but found no sign of these cherished possessions. Each time she brought it up to Damien, he'd look at her with gentle pity and advise her to rest, chalking it up to pregnancy brain. During a weekend getaway in the Hamptons, a trip that Samantha hoped would rekindle their bond, Amalana suddenly appeared. The lavish beach house belonged to Damien's business partner, who had invited them for a social gathering. But Samantha was certain she heard Damien refer to it as a private escape for the two of them. To her dismay, Amalana arrived on the second day, gliding into the living room with a breezy smile, as though she'd been invited all along. Samantha's face flushed with anger, but she tried to remain composed, not wanting to appear hysterical in front of Damien's associates. That evening, while Samantha was resting, Amalana cornered Damien near the pool. Soft music played in the background, and strings of fairy lights gave the night an ethereal glow. Casting her eyes downward, Amalana confided in him that she was growing worried about Samantha. "She's been forgetful, misplacing things, acting on edge," she told him. "I'm not blaming her. It's a stressful time, but maybe you should convince her to see a professional. I have a contact, Dr. Richard Coleman. He's discreet and excellent in cases of maternal mental health." Damien was troubled. Secretly, he had become alarmed by Samantha's constant anxiety and allegations. He wanted to help her, but was unsure how. His schedule was insane, and with so many people relying on him, he found himself leaning toward Amalana's suggestion. The idea of discreet care from a reputable doctor seemed like a caring approach rather than an extreme measure. However, Samantha's next confrontation with Amalana ignited a full-blown altercation. Spotting her husband and Amalana in close conversation by the pool, Samantha, wearing her bathrobe and a look of utter exhaustion, marched up to them and demanded to know what was so urgent that it couldn't wait. Her voice cracked under the weight of pent-up frustration. Amalana took a step back, feigning concern. Damien placed a reassuring hand on his wife's shoulder, But Samantha shrugged it off. Why are you everywhere we go? Samantha hissed at Amalana, eyes flashing with anger and heartbreak. This was supposed to be our weekend, and you show up like some intruder interfering in our lives. Amalana gave an injured look. I was invited, she murmured. I had no idea you wanted alone time. I'm sorry. In the heated silence that followed, Samantha turned to Damien, tears welling up. I can't do this anymore, she whispered, voice trembling. Then she hurried back inside, leaving Damien and Amalana by the pool with stunned expressions. The weekend ended sourly. Damien drove Samantha back to Manhattan in tense silence, his thoughts clouded. Meanwhile, Amalana remained behind, sending a carefully worded text to Damien later that night. I'm sorry if I caused any trouble. Please let me know if there's anything I can do to help. Her health and yours matter to me so much. Thus, her manufactured concern tightened its grip on Damien's mind, setting the stage for an even darker plan, one that would twist Samantha's life in ways unimaginable. A few days later, Samantha found a bouquet of roses waiting on her bedside table. Tucked within the petals was a note. I'm sorry. Let's talk tonight. D. Buoyed by the possibility of reconciliation, Samantha spent the day tidying the penthouse and preparing a favorite meal, herb-roasted roast with fresh vegetables. She was determined to share her anguish openly, hoping honesty could bridge their growing rift. The evening began promisingly enough. Damien arrived home earlier than usual, setting his briefcase aside with a heavy sigh. Samantha asked him about his day and then dove into her own struggles. She confessed how invisible she felt, overshadowed by Amalana's constant presence. Her gaze brimmed with tears, but she tried to maintain composure. Her voice was steady as she said, I need you to believe me, Damien. This woman has a plan, and it's ruining our relationship. Damien exhaled sharply. Samantha, I don't doubt your feelings are real, he admitted. But you have to understand, Amalana isn't trying to hurt you. She's been helpful in philanthropic matters, bringing connections we desperately needed. She's noticed how stressed you seem. I've noticed it too. She suggested we meet with Dr. Coleman, a specialist in prenatal mental health issues. Maybe we should. Though Samantha appreciated the concern for her well-being, the mention of Dr. Thensi Coleman felt like a betrayal. She clenched her fists. So you think I'm the problem? That I'm going crazy? No, Damien insisted. It's just, I'm worried. You've been so anxious, and the pregnancy is already tough. This could help. Samantha's heart constricted. She knew she needed support, but the suggestion that she might need a psychiatrist recommended by Amalana was too disturbing to bear. Nonetheless, she agreed, if only to show Damien she was willing to do whatever it took to heal their bond. The following week, they scheduled an appointment with Dr. Richard Coleman at a high-end private clinic on the Upper East Side. Upon arrival, Samantha noticed how opulent the clinic was. Soft carpeted floors, abstract artwork on the walls, and a discreet hush in the lobby that signaled wealth and exclusivity. Dr. Coleman himself was a polished man in his mid-50s, with silver hair and an impeccably tailored suit. His voice was calm, and he listened attentively as Samantha described her feelings of displacement and paranoia. Damien chimed in occasionally, clarifying how Samantha's behavior had changed in the last few weeks. Yet, Samantha felt unnerved by Dr. Coleman's intense gaze. It was as though he was searching for any detail that might label her unhinged. When the session ended, he prescribed mild sedatives for her insomnia and recommended further evaluation. Stress can accumulate during pregnancy, he said. We need to keep monitoring you closely. Samantha emerged from the clinic feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation. Damien held her hand reassuringly, but she sensed an invisible wedge still lodged between them. Over the next few days, Samantha tried to follow the doctor's suggestions. More rest, meditation, journaling, a different, less incriminating diary this time. She wanted to prove to Damien that she was stable. Little did she know that Dr. Coleman was an old acquaintance of Patrick Beaumont, the private equity mogul who had become an ally and sometimes investor in Damien's philanthropic projects. Amalana had arranged the introduction, carefully pulling strings to ensure Dr. Coleman's loyalties were first and foremost to her. Any plan that would secure Amalana's influence over Damien would become Dr. Coleman's plan too, especially if it meant certain lucrative consulting opportunities funded by the charitable trust. Slowly and quietly, the medical and financial pieces were aligning, paving the path to an outcome Samantha couldn't have foreseen in her darkest nightmares. Meanwhile, Samantha sensed that time was running short to salvage her marriage. She tried confiding in a few close acquaintances, but they either sympathized politely or steered the conversation toward how generous and proactive Amalana had been for Damien's charity. Feeling isolated, Samantha continued her secret journaling, documenting every suspicious detail. She also maintained regular appointments with Dr. Peterson, who offered a neutral perspective. During one of these sessions, Dr. Peterson raised an eyebrow when Samantha mentioned Dr. Coleman's name. "I've heard of him," she murmured, tapping her pen on the notepad. "He's reputable, but he's also known for pushing inpatient care for pregnant women if he suspects severe mental distress. Are you certain he's the best fit for you?" Samantha hesitated. She didn't fully trust Dr. Heatney Coleman, but the pressure from Damien and the prospect that maybe the sedatives would help her rest kept her compliance in check. Dr. Peterson simply advised her to stay vigilant and to keep her updated on any changes in treatment. Amalana's manipulations intensified. She began encouraging Damien to send Samantha off for a weekend retreat, a place where she can rest and be under supervision. Amalana pitched casually over dinner with him. She deftly highlighted her concerns by referencing the times Samantha had become tearful or accusatory in social situations. "You want her and the baby to be safe, don't you?" Amalana's question hung in the air, leading Damien to picture worst-case scenarios if Samantha's stress escalated. Under Amalana's guidance, Dr. Coleman made an urgent recommendation. Samantha should be admitted for a short-term evaluation to manage her anxiety and potential prenatal depression. He suggested a specialized wing at the Rothwood Mental Wellness Clinic, an exclusive facility that offered private rooms, top-notch counselors, and strict confidentiality. "It's not a punishment," Dr. Coleman told Damien. "It's for her and the baby's safety. She'll receive therapeutic support, healthy meals, and 24-hour care. Think of it as a spa for the mind." Damien struggled with the idea. He worried about the stigma, about how Samantha would perceive his decision. But overshadowing his reservations was an insidious fear planted by Amalana's well-timed remarks. She whispered concerns about postpartum psychosis and how unaddressed mental health issues could be fatal for mother and child. Torn and desperate, Damien decided to follow the professional advice. When he broached the subject with Samantha, she was livid. "Are you out of your mind?" she screamed through her tears. "I am not crazy, Damien. I'm pregnant and stressed, yes, but that doesn't mean I need to be locked away." Damien tried to remain calm, but his voice wavered with frustration. "I just want what's best for you. What if something happens to you or our child? Dr. Coleman strongly recommends this. It's only for a few weeks." Samantha trembled, her hand clutching her swollen belly. She felt cornered. If she refused, she risked coming off as irrational, proving Amalana's claims. If she agreed, she'd be stuck under the watchful eye of a clinic she deeply distrusted. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming. Here she was, pregnant with Damien's child, only to have him side with a woman who had waltzed into their lives unannounced. Each breath felt heavier than the last, as though her world was caving in. Ultimately, Samantha, exhausted and frightened, relented, if only to show Damien and the world she had nothing to hide. She packed a small suitcase, took a deep breath, and prepared to face the quiet halls of Rothwood Mental Wellness Clinic. Outside, as the car pulled away from their penthouse, she glanced back with tear-filled eyes, unsure if she'd ever return to a life that resembled normalcy, and clueless to the fact that Amalana's scheme was entering its most dangerous phase yet. The Rothwood Mental Wellness Clinic was as luxurious as Dr. Coleman promised. Samantha's private room had plush carpets, large windows overlooking a manicured garden, and an ensuite bathroom that rivaled a five-star hotel. The staff were polite, greeting her with gentle smiles. Yet, beneath this veneer of comfort lay a rigid system of observation and control. On the first night, Samantha was summoned to an orientation meeting. A nurse named Fiona explained the daily schedule: morning checkups, group therapy, individual therapy, meditation sessions, and enforced quiet hours after 9 p.m. "Ought to ensure a calm environment," Fiona said sweetly, handing Samantha a mild sedative for anxiety. Samantha swallowed it reluctantly, her mind still swirling with doubts. Over the next few days, Samantha played the part of a cooperative patient. She attended all the sessions, maintained polite conversations with fellow patients, many of whom were also there for prenatal or postpartum mental health support, and followed the facility's rules. Still, she couldn't shake the nagging fear that this was all part of a larger ploy. Occasionally, Dr. Coleman would summon her for a private assessment. He'd note her progress, adjusting her medication with a thoughtful nod and reminding her that she was doing this for her baby. Samantha forced a smile each time, but inside she felt a growing resentment. She left those meetings certain he was looking for any excuse to prolong her stay. Damien visited twice a week, each time appearing more conflicted. On one of these visits, Samantha tried to convince him to bring her home. "I've cooperated. I'm calmer. The baby's fine," she pleaded. "Please, can we leave? I miss you. I miss our home." Damien sighed, sadness lining his face. "Dr. Coleman recommends a full 3 weeks minimum. You're only halfway there. I promise it's for your good, Sam." Samantha noticed that each time Damien visited, Amalana managed to appear on speakerphone or through a text message, offering her support. The controlling atmosphere was suffocating. In the midst of this despair, an unexpected ally emerged. Harriet Lou, Damien's loyal personal assistant, had grown suspicious of Amalana's omnipresence. She began digging into Amalana's background, discovering inconsistencies in her resume and references. Harriet also found that Dr. Coleman's clinic had suspiciously close ties to the philanthropic foundation that Amalana helped manage. She recalled overhearing phone conversations between Amalana and Dr. Coleman that sounded too chummy for mere acquaintances. Something felt deeply wrong. Harriet decided to quietly visit Rothwood Clinic on her day off. Posing as a concerned friend, she managed to see Samantha, who was overjoyed to meet a familiar face. Over lukewarm tea in the clinic's common lounge, Harriet pressed Samantha for details. "Look, I believe you," Harriet whispered. "I think there's more going on." Samantha's eyes glistened with relief. She recounted the missing items, the suspicious moments, and Amalana's manipulations. Harriet took notes, determined to gather evidence to clear Samantha's name and protect her from further harm. Before leaving, Harriet patted Samantha's hand. "Don't give up. I'm going to help you. I promise." For the first time in weeks, a faint glow of hope flickered in Samantha's heart. Though confined to the pristine walls of Rothwood Clinic, she began to sense she wasn't entirely alone in this battle. Unbeknownst to her, Harriet's investigation would soon spark a chain of events that shattered the illusions Amalana had so carefully constructed. Events that would ultimately unveil the shocking truth behind Samantha's confinement. Harriet's inquiry took her down a rabbit hole of questionable financial dealings. She discovered that Amalana Blanc had various aliases in several states and that her so-called philanthropic achievements were a patchwork of half-truths and manufactured stories. Piecing together bank records, Harriet found multiple transfers of sizable amounts from the Rothschild Foundation to accounts connected to a shell company under Amalana's name. Motivated by her loyalty to Samantha and, to a lesser extent, her admiration for Damien, Harriet confided in Andrew Pierce, the Rothschild Foundation's head of security. He too had been uneasy about Amalana's sudden rise in influence. Together, they compared notes. Andrew had flagged suspicious login patterns on the Foundation's financial software, implicating Amalana in unauthorized transactions. Harriet reasoned that if Amalana was financially exploiting Damien, then her interest in sidelining Samantha might not be purely emotional or romantic. It could be a strategy to ensure no one stood in the way of her siphoning funds. While Harriet and Andrew gathered evidence, life for Samantha at Rothwood Clinic took a disturbing turn. Dr. Coleman introduced a new medication, claiming it would reduce her stress hormones and help stabilize her mood. Samantha felt increasingly lethargic and groggy during the day. She struggled to keep track of time, and her journal entries became disjointed. It was precisely what Amalana wanted, a Samantha too disoriented to question her surroundings or stand up for herself. During one of Damien's visits, Samantha tried desperately to communicate her concerns. "They're giving me something that makes me feel off," she murmured, her eyelids heavy with exhaustion. "I need to get out of here, Damien." He pressed a cool hand to her forehead, mistaking her sedation for feverishness. "You'll be okay. Let's trust Dr. Coleman," he said, though his eyes wavered. Samantha noted the hesitation, but was too drained to press on. Before leaving, Damien stooped to kiss her cheek. She could hardly lift her arms to hug him. One late night, confined to her bed, Samantha forced herself to fight off the medication's drowsy pull. She heard muffled voices outside her room. Shuffling to the door, she pressed her ear against it. Through the crack, she recognized Dr. Coleman's voice, calm and methodical, followed by a vaguely familiar female voice. Samantha's heart pounded as she heard the words long-term care and financial guardianship. She strained to hear more, but the voices drifted away. The idea that someone might be plotting to keep her there indefinitely set off alarm bells. Samantha realized that if Amalana was behind this, her end goal might be far more sinister than just an affair with Damien. Perhaps she wanted to incapacitate Samantha permanently, taking control of all that belonged to the Rothschild family. Fear gnawed at her heart, but also fueled her will to fight back. She vowed to remain as clear-headed as possible, even if it meant sneaking out the sedatives or feigning their effects. Outside the clinic, Harriet and Andrew compiled a dossier of Amalana's misdeeds, including copies of suspicious transfers and fraudulent references. They also discovered texts between Amalana and Dr. Coleman that hinted at unethical collusion, references to extra compensation for ensuring Samantha's extended stay, along with coded mentions of forging psychological evaluations. All the while, Amalana continued to present herself to Damien as the sympathetic confidant. She visited his office daily, offering updates about Samantha's condition. She implied that Samantha was growing more unstable, sometimes hostile toward the staff. "I just hope she recovers soon," Amalana would whisper, a tremble in her voice. "This has to be so hard on you." Yet, what Amalana didn't count on was Harriet's dogged persistence. The day Harriet managed to secure a private meeting with Damien was the day everything changed. With trembling hands, Harriet laid out the evidence in front of him: bank statements, forged documents, screenshots of messages between Amalana and Dr. Coleman. Damien's face transformed from confusion to horror as he realized the gravity of the betrayal. Still, Harriet sensed reluctance in him. Damien was a proud man, not easily swayed by rumors. But one piece of evidence tore down his last defenses: a photograph Harriet had obtained from a business contact. It showed Amalana in an intimate embrace with Patrick Beaumont, the shady equity mogul, on a yacht. The timestamp indicated it happened while she was supposedly working late at Rothschild Tower. The message was clear: Amalana was more than just a cunning charity consultant. She was deeply enmeshed with questionable partners. As Damien stared at the photo, Harriet quietly said, "Sir, please, Samantha needs you. We have to get her out of that clinic before it's too late." At that moment, a flood of realization crashed over Damien. He understood that he had unwittingly enabled Amalana's infiltration into his marriage, his finances, and his life. Whatever guilt or confusion he felt had to be set aside. Samantha was in danger, and only he could save her. Damien left his office, the dossier tucked firmly under his arm. His heart raced with conflicting emotions: anger at Amalana's deceit, shame at how easily he'd allowed himself to be manipulated, and a fierce urgency to protect Samantha. After instructing Harriet to coordinate with Andrew and gather more conclusive proof, he headed straight to Rothwood Mental Wellness Clinic. Arriving without an appointment, Damien demanded to speak with Dr. Coleman. A receptionist with a brittle smile told him that the doctor was in a meeting. "It's urgent," Damien repeated, his voice icy. Realizing she was dealing with a powerful man, the receptionist escorted him to a private consultation room. Minutes later, Dr. Coleman appeared, outwardly composed but with a flicker of unease in his eyes. Damien wasted no time. "I want my wife discharged immediately," he said, voice taut with authority. "I've looked into your finances, your ties to my foundation, and your connections to Amalana Blank. This ends now." Dr. Coleman swallowed, trying to maintain control of the situation. "Mr. Rothschild, I assure you there's been no wrongdoing. Samantha's mental state is not the issue here." Damien cut in, shoving copies of the incriminating documents across the table. Dr. Coleman's face paled as he recognized the evidence of collusion. The carefully plotted scheme was unraveling before his eyes. In a desperate attempt to salvage the situation, he insisted that Samantha needed more professional care, but his conviction was waning under Damien's glare. Meanwhile, Samantha was in her room, wearing a light robe and gazing out the window, the sedation still tugging at her mind. A nurse had just given her another pill that she'd cleverly tucked inside her cheek, later spitting it into a tissue. As the nurse left, Samantha heard raised voices down the corridor. Something about them struck her. It was Damien's voice, resolute and louder than she'd heard in months. Hope surged through her. She forced her legs to move and slipped into the hallway, quietly making her way toward the voices. She found the door to the private consultation room slightly ajar. Through it, she saw Damien confronting Dr. Coleman, raw anger etched on his features. Their words mingled with the clinic's sterile air. The nurse from earlier spotted Samantha lurking by the door and tried to steer her back to her room. But just then, Damien yanked open the door from the inside, scanning the corridor until his eyes locked on Samantha. Relief and guilt swirled in his expression. "Samantha," he said softly, "I'm so sorry." She rushed into his arms, tears coursing down her cheeks. Dr. Coleman spluttered objections, but Damien made it clear. "If you try to stop me from leaving with my wife, I'll see this entire clinic under criminal investigation by morning." One of the head nurses, evidently keen on preserving the clinic's reputation, quickly interceded, stepping aside to allow Samantha's discharge. Within the hour, Samantha was in Damien's car, her hand trembling in his as he drove away from the imposing facade of Rothwood Clinic. She felt dazed, uncertain of what would come next, but relief mingled with heartbreak. She still bore the scars of the weeks of mistrust, sedation, and emotional turmoil, and she couldn't ignore the unborn life within her, a fragile reminder of the need for safety and stability. Glancing over at Damien, Samantha saw tears in his eyes for the first time since she'd known him. "I've failed you," he said, voice thick with regret. "But I promise, I'll fix this. I'll make it right." The wind whipped past the car windows as he pressed the accelerator, determined to confront Amalana at once. Neither had any idea just how far Amalana would go to secure what she believed she deserved, or how the confrontation would change everything. Damien insisted on taking Samantha back to their penthouse. She was drained, craving the comfort of her own surroundings. Yet the moment they stepped into the foyer, an uneasy hush enveloped them. The lights were dimmed, unusual for that early hour. Samantha hesitated, scanning the rooms. It felt as though a ghost had passed through the space. Suddenly, they heard a soft clinking sound emanating from the study. Damien motioned for Samantha to stay behind while he cautiously proceeded. But Samantha followed close, unwilling to be left alone, her hand protectively cradling her stomach. They found Amalana standing near Damien's mahogany desk, rummaging through drawers. Her hair was disheveled, and the cunning gleam in her eyes had darkened into something wilder. She froze upon seeing them, but only for a moment. "You're back," she said, her voice unnervingly calm. "You shouldn't be here. I was just collecting a few important documents." Damien's gaze fell on the safe behind the desk, open. He noted some scattered papers, presumably financial documents or possibly legal forms. His anger rose, fueled by the betrayal. "What are you doing in my home?" he asked through gritted teeth. "You've crossed every possible line." Amalana's laugh was low, tinged with desperation. "I only wanted what we both deserved," she said, her gaze flicking momentarily to Samantha. "We could have had so much, Damien, but she keeps standing in the way." Samantha's eyes hardened. The fear that once threatened to cripple her now churned into fury. "You manipulated him, lied to everyone, sent me to a mental hospital. And for what? Money? Power?" Amalana took a step closer, her features twisting. "You know nothing," she spat. "You were always fragile, so easy to outmaneuver. I was the one who brought in the sponsors, the deals, the expansions. I deserve a share of this empire." Damien clenched his fists. "I've seen the evidence. You've embezzled the funds from my foundation, colluded with Dr. Coleman. You were behind everything." With her options cornered, Amalana's demeanor shifted from spiteful to a cunning vulnerability. She tried a last desperate gambit. "You can still let me walk away. Don't involve the police. I'll vanish. No one needs to know. If I go down, Dr. Coleman goes down, and so do any reputations tied to him. Think about your philanthropic empire, the scandal." Samantha shook her head. "You tried to ruin my life and steal from my husband. There's no walking away." Amalana's lips curled into a sneer. "You think I won't fight back?" All I need to do is leak stories about your mental instability to the press. Don't forget, I have your journal, your so-called hallucinations. I'll make it look like the entire Rothschild family has skeletons in their closet. It'll damage your name more than mine. But the threat no longer worked. Harriet and Andrew had already locked down communications and were ready to expose Amalana's fraud to the authorities. Calmly, Damien pulled his phone from his pocket. "You won't get the chance," he said. "This ends tonight." Before Amalana could utter another word, the police, summoned by Harriet, stepped into the penthouse. Their arrival was swift, as if choreographed. Amalana's eyes darted around, realizing her escape routes had evaporated. She tried to maintain her composure, but her trembling hands betrayed her. As two officers gently but firmly placed her in handcuffs, Amalana glared at Samantha. "Enjoy your victory," she hissed. "But remember, we're all wearing masks. Yours will slip one day too." They led her out, her accusations echoing through the silent apartment. Samantha sank into a chair, shaken by the confrontation. Damien moved to her side, wrapping a protective arm around her. They both stared at the open safe, the scattered papers, the tangible remnants of betrayal. And yet, beneath the tension, a wave of relief washed over them. Amalana's manipulation had come to light, and for the moment, it seemed that justice had finally arrived. In the following hours, Harriet, Andrew, and even some of the police officers offered support and reassurance. Samantha clutched Damien's hand, her other gently resting on her pregnant belly. There would be questions from the media, depositions, and a ripple of scandal, but the immediate threat was gone. For the first time in months, Samantha felt a burden lift from her soul, though the scars, she knew, would linger. The aftermath of Amalana's arrest cascaded through the Rothschilds' world like a thunderclap. Headlines splashed across tabloids the next morning, proclaiming socialite mistress exposed, embezzlement and manipulation scandal. Yet, the Rothschild name remained relatively shielded thanks to Harriet and Andrew's meticulous documentation. They had carefully handed over all relevant evidence to the authorities, framing the narrative so that Amalana stood at the center of the conspiracy. Damien, however, knew damage control was far from over. Investors, donors, and partners raised eyebrows at how such a cunning individual had infiltrated his inner circle. The Rothschild Foundation faced an audit, a necessary step to restore donor confidence. Damien poured himself into the process, drafting public statements and fielding tough questions from the media. In every conversation, he acknowledged his oversight and emphasized that corrective measures were underway. For Samantha, the healing process was more personal. Physically, she had to flush out the remnants of the sedatives from her system and regain her strength. Emotionally, she grappled with nightmares of being locked away again, of losing her autonomy. Dr. Peterson, her longtime confidant, became her guiding light. Through extended sessions, Samantha worked through the trauma of betrayal, not just by Amalana and Dr. Coleman, but also the sense of betrayal she felt from Damien, who hadn't believed her at first. Despite the heartbreak, Samantha recognized Damien was also a victim of Amalana's manipulations. Bit by bit, they began rebuilding their trust. Some nights, they stayed up late in the penthouse library, talking openly about the cracks that Amalana had exploited, the emotional distance, the unspoken fears about becoming parents, the struggles Damien faced balancing massive responsibilities. Gradually, the shadows receded, replaced by a cautious sense of hope. As the weeks passed, the legal system pressed forward. Amalana's trial date was set, and Dr. Coleman was also under investigation for malpractice and conspiracy to commit fraud. Though out on bail, Amalana kept her distance. Once in a while, Samantha's phone buzzed with unknown calls, but she never answered. She was determined to close that dark chapter for good. Meanwhile, Harriet became something of a hero around the office. Staff members recognized her quick thinking, saved not only Samantha's welfare, but also the reputation of the entire foundation. Andrew, too, received praise from the board. Some even suggested awarding them with official honors. For both Harriet and Andrew, the greatest reward was seeing Samantha safe at home, free from the clutches of false confinement. The final weeks of Samantha's pregnancy arrived, bringing a flurry of preparation. The nursery, left in disarray during her time at the clinic, was now a haven of soft pastel decor and plush toys. Damien took time off work to attend every prenatal appointment. He even accompanied Samantha to a special birthing class, nervously practicing breathing techniques. They smiled often, tentative smiles, but genuine. It was at one of those appointments that the reality of impending parenthood finally sank in for Damien. Watching the ultrasound, seeing their baby's tiny limbs move, he was overcome with emotion. After the appointment, he knelt before Samantha, placing a gentle hand on her belly. "I'm so sorry," he whispered again. She bent down, kissing his forehead, tears forming in her eyes. Forgiveness, like love, is a journey, they both knew. But they were moving forward, hand in hand. Behind them, the city thrummed with business as usual. Society pages still carried gossip, and the business world moved at a frenetic pace. Yet, within the once tense walls of the Rothschild penthouse, a softer calm prevailed. Samantha often found herself humming lullabies as she folded tiny baby clothes, thoughts drifting to the little life soon to enter theirs. Together, she and Damien were determined to protect their child from any specter of the past. But no story ends so simply, especially one born of deceit and heartbreak. The trial loomed, and with it, the possibility of a final attempt by Amalana to strike back. Though the Rothschilds prepared to testify, they couldn't predict how that day in court would unfold, or the shocking reveal that might still lie hidden, waiting to upend their fragile peace once more. It happened on a brisk morning in early spring. Samantha was 2 weeks away from her due date, her belly large, her steps slow. She and Damien arrived at the courthouse, bracing themselves for the chaos of cameras and reporters. Harriet and Andrew followed closely, carrying folders of documents that detailed Amalana's wrongdoing. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged. Amalana sat at the defense table in a sleek blazer, her hair pinned back, lips set in a determined line. Occasionally, her gaze flickered towards Samantha and Damien, though she betrayed no outward remorse. Beside her, a high-profile lawyer whispered strategies, scanning the room for any sign of advantage. The prosecutor began by outlining the case, charges of financial fraud, conspiracy, and potential abuse of mental health statutes. One by one, witnesses testified. Foundation staff, a few donors who had been misled, even Dr. Coleman, who had brokered a plea deal hoping to reduce his own sentence. During cross-examination, Amalana's lawyer tried to paint Samantha as unstable, referencing her stay at Rothwood Clinic and quoting lines from her private journal. Samantha's heart clenched in fear as the lawyer read excerpts out of context, sentences that sounded paranoid when isolated. Damien clenched his jaw. He dreaded this tactic. Yet, Harriet and Andrew had prepared a counteroffensive. Harriet took the stand, calmly explaining the circumstances that led to Samantha's unjust confinement. Andrew supplied evidence that Samantha's journal was acquired without her permission and that its content was manipulated. The turning point arrived when Harriet produced text messages and recorded calls between Amalana and Dr. Coleman, revealing how they'd planned to keep Samantha in the clinic until Amalana could finalize her financial scheme. Looking rattled, Amalana shot her lawyer a tense glance. The air in the courtroom grew thick with tension as the prosecution played an audio clip of Amalana's voice conspiring with Dr. Coleman. "Amalana, keep her sedated. She needs to stay there at least until I secure the last set of transfers. We can't risk her interfering." A collective gasp rippled through the audience. Samantha felt Damien's hand tighten around hers. She closed her eyes, remembering those nights of forced sedation, the feeling of helplessness, the stolen weeks of her pregnancy. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she kept her composure. When Amalana took the stand in her defense, she unleashed a volley of accusations, claiming that she and Damien had a passionate affair, that Samantha had threatened her life, that the money transfers were payoffs for services. But these claims rang hollow in the face of the documented evidence. Even if Damien had once been emotionally entranced by Amalana's charm, he'd never authorized such blatant embezzlement. The prosecution picked apart her arguments, highlighting contradictions in her timeline and statements. Closing arguments drew near. Amalana's lawyer tried to cast doubt, insinuating that the Rothschilds had orchestrated a scapegoat scenario to cover potential foundation mismanagement. Yet, the weight of the evidence, bank statements, recorded conversations, Dr. Coleman's testimony, piled inexorably against Amalana. It was a battle she could not win. At long last, the jury retired to deliberate. Samantha exhausted and emotionally spent, leaned into Damien's embrace in the courthouse hallway. They didn't have to wait long. Less than 3 hours later, the jury returned. The foreperson stood, clearing her throat before delivering the verdict. Guilty on all major charges. Amalana's face crumpled, rage and disbelief shining through. In the final moments, as the bailiff moved to handcuff her, the judge denied any request for bail, citing the severity and malice of her crimes. Samantha felt a wave of relief, tempered by sadness that their lives had been marred by such treachery, but at least justice had prevailed. As they left the courtroom, reporters bombarded them with questions, flashes from cameras lighting up the corridor. Damien shielded Samantha, answering politely but briefly. Harriet and Andrew whisked them away to a waiting car. Once inside, Samantha let out a long, trembling breath. "It's over," she whispered, placing a protective hand over her belly. Damien slipped an arm around her shoulders, pressing a tender kiss to her temple. "Yes," he echoed softly. "It's over." Yet in their hearts, they knew the road ahead involved further healing. Scars of betrayal never vanish overnight. But for now, for this moment, the greatest threat was neutralized, and they were free to look toward the arrival of their child with hope, unencumbered by Amalana's dark shadow. The final weeks of Samantha's pregnancy glided by with an unexpected tranquility. Word of Amalana's conviction spread, and the scandal slowly receded from the public's ravenous eye. Though occasionally a sensationalist magazine tried to reignite the drama, the Rothschilds held firm. Their priority was the baby, not the gossip cycle. In the soft glow of early dawn, Samantha's contractions began. Damien rushed her to the hospital, nerves frayed but spirit unwavering. Hours later, they welcomed a baby girl, Evelyn Grace Rothschild, into the world. Samantha wept at the first cry, the sound of new life dissolving the lingering fear and sorrow. Damien cut the umbilical cord, tears streaming down his usually stoic face. For the next few days, the hospital room became a sanctuary of joy. Harriet arrived with flowers and balloons, her eyes misting as she held the tiny infant. Andrew dropped by with a small teddy bear wearing a pink bow. Even Dr. Peterson visited, all smiles as she noted Samantha's calm demeanor and healthy mental state. The past darkness seemed distant, overshadowed by the radiant bond of a growing family. After they brought Evelyn home, Damien and Samantha settled into a peaceful routine. Night feedings, lullabies, and stolen naps whenever the baby slept. The penthouse, once haunted by silent tensions and manipulated illusions, was now filled with the coos and cries of new life. Photographs replaced the sense of foreboding. Pictures of Evelyn in her crib, in Damien's arms, or gazing wide-eyed at Samantha. In quiet moments, Samantha reflected on her journey. She remembered the terrifying days at Rothwood Clinic, the betrayal by those she thought were professionals, and her near destruction at Amalana's hands. Yet she also remembered the allies she found in Harriet, Andrew, and Dr. Peterson. Most importantly, she felt renewed gratitude for Damien's awakening and unwavering support once he finally saw the truth. One evening, as the baby slept in her bassinet, Samantha and Damien sat by the large windows overlooking the city lights. Samantha ran her fingers across Damien's hand. "We've come so far," she said, her voice gentle. "I was so scared I'd lose you. We nearly lost each other." Damien closed his eyes, recalling the shame he felt for doubting her. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you sooner. I almost let her destroy us," he murmured, sadness mingling with resolve. "But we're here now, stronger, I hope. We'll raise Evelyn with honesty and protect her from any darkness." Samantha leaned her head on his shoulder, the warmth of his presence anchoring her. Outside, the city pulsed with life, vibrant and unapologetic. But within the penthouse, a hush of contentment settled. This was their fresh start, a chance to rebuild trust and cherish the family they were forming. Amalana's name soon faded into a cautionary tale, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous threats come in the guise of friendship and empathy. In the months that followed, the Rothschild Foundation reorganized its board to prevent any future infiltration. Dr. Coleman faced a separate trial, and from his prison cell, Amalana's manipulative presence dwindled into a bitter memory. As Samantha watched her daughter yawn and stretch tiny fingers, she knew that the scars of the past would not vanish overnight. But they would guide her to value what truly mattered: love, loyalty, and the willingness to fight for what is right. In that quiet nighttime glow, the Rothschild family embraced their second chance, a chance free from secrets, illusions, and the poisonous influence of a mistress who once threatened to tear them apart. And so ends the tangled saga of a millionaire, his pregnant wife, and the cunning mistress who nearly destroyed them all. In the end, love and determination triumphed over manipulation and deceit, proving that no matter how deep the betrayal, the light of truth eventually shines through. The Rothschilds emerged scarred but stronger, cherishing the gift of a new life and a renewed commitment to each other. Thank you for joining us on this roller coaster of hidden agendas and shocking revelations. If you found yourself on the edge of your seat, remember that your support helps us create more captivating stories. Please like this video, share it with fellow drama lovers, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another thrilling tale. Your engagement fuels our passion to bring more unforgettable real-life dramas to your screen. Until next time, stay safe and keep believing in the power of truth.